Good morning. Good morning. Hello. I don't want you guys to leave me hanging. Okay. Good morning. My name is Donna Williams, and I am the chair of the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success. It is 10:08, January 25th, 2023, and I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success. Please be aware that this meeting is being broadcast live via the internet. Members, when I call your name, please announce present. Donna Williams, here. Sam Torn, Vice Chair.
Here.
Richard Clemmer. Fred Frias, he's here. He's on a call. Emma Swartz. Here. Daniel Wong. Here. And Georgia Hagee. Here. Hey. Welcome, Georgia. Well, I get to say your new last name. Georgia is our student representative. Please record in the minutes that we have a quorum. Before we begin the meeting, I'd like to announce that the following items have been withdrawn from today's agenda, Agenda item 5B, consideration and possible action to adopt the Certification Advisory Council's recommendation related to a request from Needleman Institutes of Surveying Technology for its first certificate of authority to grant degrees in Texas. Agenda item 2 is consideration and possible action to adopt the minutes for the October 26, 2022 committee meetings. Do I have a motion to adopt the October 2022 minutes of the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success?
Motion.
I have a motion by Sam Torn and a second by Daniel Wong. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Agenda item 3 is public testimony on agenda items relating to the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success. I have in my notes, we do not have anyone to testify, so we'll go on to the next item. Agenda item 4 is consideration and possible action to adopt the consent calendar. The consent calendar includes non-controversial items that we think can be approved without comment or discussion. This allows us to save time for other items that need more of our attention. Highlighted items in gray are the consent items on the agenda. The following items are on consent. Agenda item 5A. Consideration and possible action to adopt the report to the board on school closures and or teach outs pursuant to Board Rule 7.76. Agenda item 5C, consideration and possible action to adopt the recommendation relating to the July 2022 annual compliance report for institutions under a certificate of authorizations, names beginning with P through Z. Members, are there any agenda items that anyone would like to add to the consent calendar? Are there any agenda items that anyone wants to remove from the consent calendar? Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
I have a motion by Emma Swartz and a second by Richard Clemmer. Who was the second by it? Richard Clemmer. Okay. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Agenda item 5A was approved on consent. Agenda item 5B, this item has been withdrawn from today's agenda. Agenda item 5C was approved on consent. Agenda item 5D1 is consideration and possible action to approve the issuance of a request for applications for the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Basic Grant Program. Dr. Tina Jackson will present this item and be available to answer questions.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm Tina Jackson, Assistant Commissioner of Workforce Education. The Perkins Basic or Formula Grant Program awards funds based on statutory formula for distribution. Funds are awarded to public two-year state and technical colleges offering career and technical education programs. Colleges use the funds to supplement local funds to create and improve CTE programs and to provide support to students in 9 statutory categories with known barriers to success. The Perkins Basic RFA sets forth statutory, regulatory, and programmatic guidelines for building local programs that can meet the 3 Perkins Core Performance Indicators. Funds are awarded to each college upon submission of an application that complies with the requirements of the RFA. This concludes my report.
Thank you. Members, do we have any questions for Dr. Jackson? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the issuance of a request for applications for the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Basic Grant Program?
So moved.
Have a motion made by Mr. Torn. May I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Frias. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Agenda item 5D2 is consideration and possible action to approve the issuance of a request for applications for the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education State Leadership Grant Program. Dr. Tina Jackson will present this item and be available for questions as well.
The Perkins State Leadership Grant Program awards funds on a competitive basis to public two-year colleges submitting successful applications. Proposed projects must address one or more of the required or permissible statutory uses of state leadership funds or one or more goals from the Building the Talent Strong Texas Strategic Plan for Higher Education. Projects must be designed to have a regional, multi-regional, or statewide impact. The State Leadership RFA sets forth statutory, regulatory, and programmatic guidelines for building competitive proposals to strengthen career and technical education in Texas through curricular, programmatic, student services, professional development projects, and other initiatives. Funds are awarded to colleges who propose projects show the strongest likelihood to make sustainable differences in the targeted project area. The fiscal year 2024 RFA will implement the Texas evidence-based grant-making model for all state leadership grants. And this concludes my report.
Okay. Any questions? I have one question. How long is the request for applications period?
The period is about 2 months.
Okay,
Mhm.
and then after we receive all of the applications and the institutions apply, how long do it take us to review the grants, and does the final selection come back to the board for approval?
The final selection does not come back to the board. It takes us about 6 weeks to get the final review of all of the applications and the letters out
Okay.
to the individuals who are awarded, the institutions that are awarded.
Okay, although it doesn't come back to the board, do we get a report of who applied and how many actually applied and why the group that was selected?
Yes, we have a report that does go to the commissioner. And so he's aware of that. And I'm sure that if you would like, we can make that available to you as well.
Okay. All right. All right, any additional questions? If not, may I have a motion to approve the issuance of the request for applications for the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education State Leadership Grant Program? Have a motion by Daniel Wong. May I have a second? Seconded by Emma Swartz. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Okay, we have one more. Agenda
Mhm.
item 5D3 is consideration and possible action to approve the issuance of a request for applications for the Carl D. Perkins Equitable Access and Opportunity Grant Program. Dr. Tina Jackson will present this item and be available for questions as well.
Yes.
Mhm.
The Perkins Equitable Access and Opportunity Program awards state leadership funds on a competitive basis to colleges proposing innovative projects targeted on Perkins special population students that are known for barriers of success. I'm going to share just a brief overview of what those special populations are. So individuals with disabilities, individuals from economically disadvantaged families, individuals preparing for non-traditional fields, single parents, including single women who are pregnant, out of work individuals, English language learners, youth who have aged out of the foster care system, members of our armed forces, and then also members who are in active duty. So those are our special populations that we target for this particular program. This is also an initiative that is being, we're partnering up with the TWIC office and also with TWC. So it's been a great journey so far. Proposed projects must follow the framework of the Texas Evidence-Based Grant-Making Model developed by the Results for America State and Local Workforce Fellowship, an initiative of the Texas Workforce Investment Council. The program sets forth with statutory and regulatory programmatic guidelines for proposals, including 5 evidence tiers that serve as indicators that fund projects that will be successful and trackable to student cohorts for interim and post-project evaluation. And this concludes my report.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve the issuance of a request for applications for the Carl D. Perkins Equitable Access and Opportunity Grant Program? I have a motion made by Mr. Clemmer. May I have a second? Seconded by Sam Torn. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Jackson.
you.
Agenda item 5E1 is consideration and possible action to approve the request for the Alamo District St. Philip's College for a Bachelor's of Applied Technology, a BAT in cybersecurity. Members, representatives from St. Philip's College will be available to answer questions in tomorrow's quarterly board meeting. Removing the requirement for them to attend both the committee and the board meeting will reduce their travel time and cost to the institutions. And Elizabeth Mayer, Assistant Commissioner for Academic and Health Affairs, will present this item and be available to answer questions today, but the institutions will be here tomorrow.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So the Alamo District St. Philip's College is seeking approval to offer a Bachelor of Applied Technology or a BAT degree program in cybersecurity beginning in fall of 2023. The proposed program would build on Alamo St. Philip's existing 60 semester credit hour Associate of Applied Science or AAS and Information Technology Cybersecurity Specialist curriculum. The BAT in cybersecurity would be offered face-to-face and online. Workforce data suggests above average growth for cybersecurity occupations requiring a baccalaureate degree. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average employment rate for cybersecurity related occupations is expected to grow at a much greater rate, 15%, than the average for all occupations of 5%. The Texas Workforce Commission expects the state employment rate to grow at a faster rate of 29% than the average for all occupations of 18%. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. Members, any questions for Ms. Mayer? If not, do I have a motion to request? Oh, okay. Mhm.
It is part of the bigger Alamos. They have all combined and are now part of the Alamo district, which includes several of the institutions.
So the Alamo, so
part of the Alamo is the name of it.
it's, yeah, it's so so the Alamo colleges are, it's one of the, it's one of the colleges within the Alamo colleges. So when we look at the data on community colleges, you usually see a line for Alamo colleges, but sometimes it'll be broken out by the individual colleges. So this is one specific campus.
So the Alamo colleges are like Lone Star or something like that.
Mhm.
Okay,
With several campuses. Mhm.
they're mainly in San Antonio or Central Texas.
Yeah, they've not consolidated their organization and accreditation, they're all
Right.
under one umbrella. Like Lone Star or Dallas colleges.
National awards, but not.
Yeah, they have they just recently won I think they had an Aspen
Yeah.
winner in the last couple of years. And so that, it's very strong college system. They've been a great partner with us.
Well, I think cybersecurity is really a critical area and one that we should fully endorse and support, and one that will see a lot of growth. So
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, several of them will have jobs before they even graduate. Mhm. Yeah. All right, any additional questions? If not, do I have a motion to approve the request from Alamo District St. Philip's College for a Bachelor's of Applied Technology, BAT, in cybersecurity? Motion made by Richard Clemmer. May I have a second? Seconded by Sam Torn. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Agenda item 5E2 is consideration and possible action to approve the request from University of Houston for a Doctor of Business Administration, a DBA in Business Administration. Members, representatives from the University of Houston will be available for questions tomorrow in our quarterly board meeting. Elizabeth Mayer will present this item as well and be available to answer questions.
The University of Houston is seeking approval to offer a Doctor of Business Administration, or a DBA, degree program in business administration. The proposed program would require 54 semester credit hours and would begin in the fall of 2023. The proposed program would be offered face-to-face to students in Houston. The curriculum plan estimates that students would complete the degree in 3 years. Students are expected to keep their existing jobs while participating in courses on the weekends. The job prospects are excellent, with 121 Texas doctoral graduates in business during 2020, where only 9.4% of the 1,285 projected annual openings for post-secondary teachers and management analysts alone. The institution currently has sufficient faculty and support staff in place to begin the proposed program. So no additional hires would be necessary to begin the program. The UH School of Management is already accredited by the Association to Advance Collegiate Schools of Business, and the proposed program would be considered accredited until the next review cycle. That concludes my remarks.
All right, any questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the request from the University of Houston for a Doctor of Business Administration, a DBA in Business Administration? I'll move. I have a motion made by Emma Schwartz. May I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Daniel Wong. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
So, Madam Chair, if I can make a comment just for the members,
Mhm.
that this is, of course, the staff has made the recommendation. This is a committee meeting for CAWS. So some of you, the representatives will be here tomorrow. So this is just a recommendation to the full board for a full vote after we hear from the representatives. So the board obviously will have questions, or can have questions for the final vote. So these are just recommendations. So you'll have an opportunity to visit with the representatives, and I think this is a good format to be able to, as you, Madam Chair, eloquently mentioned, it saves them time and money as the
It does.
institutions. But also, I want to make sure the board feels comfortable that we're going to be able to to ask questions and vet, and the staff has done a great job of vetting these programs already, but just feel comfortable that the final decision will be made at the board meeting tomorrow.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. So we're moving it from the committee to the full board. Okay. All right. I have lunch on 5F. It's just so we want to. Okay. Okay, so I also have a note that says, as we're moving so quickly through the agenda, we will not break for lunch at this time. Okay. Agenda item 5G are the proposed rules. Agenda item 5G1 is consideration and possible action to adopt proposed amendments to board rules 2.50 through 2.58 and 2.70 through 2.74 concerning approval process for the new associate's degrees. Members, you have supplemental material for this item printed on gold rod paper in your books. Elizabeth Mayer will present this item and be available to answer questions.
We have a PowerPoint presentation as well.
Okay.
So the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board proposes to adopt new rules to add subchapter D to chapter 2 of Coordinating Board rules. This rulemaking establishes processes and approvals of new academic associate's degrees. So the proposed rule continues the Coordinating Board's ongoing project to revise program approval processes. Previously, at the October board meeting, you all adopted revised rules for approving new professional, doctoral, master's, and bachelor's degrees, as well as academic certificates, establishing a new chapter 2 in rule. The proposed rules extend those processes to cover academic associate degrees. Proposed rules cover a new subchapter D, approval processes for new associate degrees. These approval processes for these degrees have similar approval levels and criteria timelines and requirements as other degree programs submitted by the agency. Next slide, please. So the academic associate's degree. So this is the type of degree program generally intended to transfer to an upper level baccalaureate degree program that will satisfy the lower division requirements for a bachelor's degree in a specific discipline. So the academic associate's degree includes the Associate of Arts, Associate of Science, or the Associate of Arts and Teaching degrees. Next slide, please. So the proposed rules include the option of an embedded associate's degree for public universities and public health related institutions. An embedded associate's degree aligns with the definition of an embedded credential and must be wholly embedded within a bachelor's program. So an embedded associate must be comprised of coursework and content within a proposed or an existing degree program. Based upon the language that we're using with this degree, will only be in the same or related academic discipline as the bachelor's degree the institution is already offering. Just as a frame of reference, so this has actually historically been done by some doctoral programs. For those who don't necessarily finish their doctorate, they can have an off-ramp and get a master's.
Or I would say on the way to earning a doctorate. Just so I have a master's in Passant, but did finish the
Your doctorate.
but to your point, yeah, in the doctorate. So this is a good practice within graduate programs to embed other credentials along the way. I think actually, Mr. Chairman, this is something you know very well, right?
Yes, I've had that as well. So I think it's a good process. So in my grad program, it also embedded a program after the 2 years and then got another degree, the doctorate, Yep.
So as we've mentioned, and I think you all have heard us talk about before, so we have approximately 4 million students in Texas with some college and no degree. So this now gives institutions the opportunity to potentially go back and award this credential for these students. So based upon a UT system study that was conducted of their academic institutions, looking at a 2008 cohort, they showed approximately 10% of the cohort, or 1,700 students, who had 90 semester credit hours and not completed their degree within 6 years. So this is going to give an opportunity for students who have potentially earned a significant amount of credit, potentially taken out debt, and at least have something to show for it. So that is one of the reasons that we think this is a student success effort that will improve and hopefully get those numbers of students who have gone through and achieved some credit, some kind of credential. Next slide. So what we put this out for a public comment, and we received comments from 5 entities. So we received comments from 1 public university system, 1 public university, 2 community colleges, and the Texas Association of Community Colleges. So there were comments from these entities that included concerns about the type of institution that would be awarding the associate's degrees. So in the development of the proposed rules for the embedded associate's degrees, the coordinating board was focused on increasing the number of students who are eligible to receive a higher education credential. Institutions, especially those with existing partnerships, are still able to collaboratively develop policies for determining whether students are awarded an associate's degree, either through this embedded model or reverse transfer or another mechanism. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with reverse transfer, but so this is a means by which a student may receive their associate's degree after they've transferred to a 4-year degree. The student's academic transcript is forwarded to the 2-year institution and reviewed to see if the student has become eligible for the associates. The student would have earned at least 30 semester credit hours successfully completing that coursework, and earned a cumulative total of 66 semester credit hours. However, because of the requirements required for the data sharing, this is not necessarily widely utilized by institutions currently. However, the coordinating board commits to providing guidance and transparent approval processes, not only for the embedded associates, but we're actually actively going to be working to improve the data sharing that is causing some challenges for the institutions to be able to do that reverse transfer process. It's been around since about 2011. It's just not widely utilized because of the data sharing that's required amongst the institutions. There was also a comment about allowing universities to award an embedded associate's degree, which may lead the universities to offering a terminal associate's degree that would have otherwise been awarded by a community college, either prior to transferring or through the reverse transfer process. So the coordinating board, as I said, agrees there is value in reverse transfer, and that allowing universities to award an embedded associate's degree is intended to be another mechanism for student success along with reverse transfer. The coordinating board is also committed, as I mentioned, to expanding and streamlining the processes to further support reverse transfer, since this is not currently widely utilized. The agency will look at possible options to further the data sharing necessary to allow for more reverse transfer opportunities for our institutions to benefit students. And so now I'm going to move on to the revisions of the proposed rules that were based upon the comments that we were received. Next slide, please. So based upon the
Hey,
comments.
before you do that,
Yes, sir.
so what's the benefit of this to the student, and what's the benefit to the university?
The reverse transfer or the embedded or
Oh,
either?
the embedded. I still don't know what reverse transfer is. It must have something to do with the NIL or the transfer portal, but I don't.
So the embedded associate, so one example would be, so if a student is potentially starting a program at a university, and for whatever reason, they've achieved potentially 60 semester credit hours and they stop out. So what we are hoping is potentially that the universities will do some kind of data pool at the end of every semester or a couple of times a year to see what those students look like and be able to offer them that associate's degree. So instead of having nothing for potentially, since so many students don't complete, it would at least give them an opportunity to have some kind of credential.
But what's it worth?
So that's a good question, because we do see that students who have associate's degrees have greater earnings potential than students who just have some college and don't have a credential. So there is, from the same kind of analyses we're doing on the Talent Strong Texas plan in general, where you can see that there is a wage premium associated with finishing. So we're really hoping that, as Elizabeth mentions, both you've got a milestone sort of built into the program, and we'll have to watch over time. So what does the market value of that look like, particularly for students who stop out and drop out, and we have a lot of them, that they would be able to have a credential that they would leave with. We have a lot, as Elizabeth mentioned, we have tens of thousands of students who have substantial numbers of credit hours who dropped out.
Yeah, I get all that, and I get the benefit of a credential that is targeted specifically to a specific skill that gets you a specific job. But are we talking about now, like, if you've had students 30 years ago that dropped out, you're going to go back and say, well, hey, you don't know it, but you got a degree in this, and the reason they do is because just having that on their resume means they're going to make more money?
They can do that, yes. So that's something that, and that's something the universities have done some already. So a great example is at West Texas A&M. So Walter Wendler is president of Texas A&M and told me about how, routinely they're updating programs and the pull-out requirements and add requirements. And so they had been working on streamlining one of their degree programs, and he had his team come to him and say, they run all the data through their degree audit system. And they said, they did have a couple of students who had stopped out, I think a decade before, but they checked enough boxes where now when they removed a requirement to be able to award the bachelor's degree to these former students. So they reached out to him and invited him to graduation. And one of the students did take him up on it. And they went from being a dropout to being a graduate because they'd earned it, because the criteria for earning the degree had actually changed. So it would be the case that and we'd encourage the universities to go back and run their data through their degree audit systems as they're adding programs, streamlining programs, as they're creating the embedded credentials, and go ahead and award folks the degrees that they've earned.
And is there any benefit to the university in terms of funding?
Not so much in terms of funding. For the community colleges, when they would embed credentials, there could potentially be benefit if we do adopt the outcomes-based formula, and they either embed associate's degrees in the bachelor's degree programs. We don't have very many bachelor's degree programs at community colleges, or even if they embed short-term workforce credentials in the associate's degrees, then there could potentially be a financial benefit for them. For the universities, we don't do an outcomes-based funding model right now. So it would help them on their graduation rates, but it wouldn't help them on their state funding.
So what I like about it is that as an employer in our practices, we if I see that on somebody's resume and find out their story, I think that's a plus, because versus no credential, I know that they've invested time, and I think our employers, I think that gives them a little bit more specific information to be able to provide opportunities for the workforce. You've got some skills, you may not have a full degree, but you do have some background. And so now you just have to put in, no degree or just high school diploma. So I think it also hopefully will maybe make some of these people go on to school and continue their
That's right.
education.
Well, and I think Mr. Torrent also speaks to your earlier question about how the institutions think about how to engage students and meet students where they're at, because there are going to be these students who have earned the associate's degrees, but they're going to be students who are close, or students who earn the associate's degree and maybe are close to the next credential that they could stack on top of that. And so part of what we're hoping to see is that helps focus the energy and attention for how do we get these students to the next rung on the ladder? How do we get more students to complete? So it's another tool in the toolbox for the institutions that I'm hoping will help catalyze some of those conversations on campuses. I know some of the systems, particularly within the A&M system, particularly at places like West Texas A&M, I know they're prime and they're focused on this issue. We'd like to see that broadly across the higher ed institutions.
Yeah, I get it. I guess the flip side of what you just said, though, is how many of those students get to that credential and say, okay, now I've got all I need.
That could certainly happen. Depending on what's going on in the job market.
And their lives too.
Yeah, and depending and with their lives, that's yeah, so that's certainly possible. I don't know how many students that we would see do that, and so this might sound a little heretical coming from Commissioner of Higher Education. I'm not sure that's necessarily a bad thing, depending on what folks' goals are, depending on what their life plans are. It might be fine for them to take the associate's degree and leave and go on to the next thing.
And that goes back, Sam, to what Mr. Torn brought up a great idea earlier, thinking outside the box. Is the 4-year degree the old system? This provides, I see it's providing an opportunity for our citizens, Texans, to be able to get into the workforce that may not be able to. You might want to mention about stackable degrees, because you mentioned, because that's a concept I think that a lot of higher ed policy folks are talking about now.
Yeah, this is something we more see in community colleges, but again, we want to encourage more the universities, especially those regional universities, to think about. So where instead of the assumption being that students are just going to be enrolled full time for either 2 years for a 2-year degree or 4 years for a 4-year degree. So for example, Austin Community College has been a leader in this, that they'll have students who will start out maybe on the continuing education side, and they'll do a workforce credential. Well, Austin has especially over the last couple of years, developed multiple options then for students to stack other credentials on that, convert what they did on the non-credit continuing education side into their credit program, and continue to stack these credentials towards an associate's degree. So I think that's more the direction that we want to encourage institutions in general to consider.
Just a logistic question. So 4-year institutions don't generally award associate's degrees. So they're the ones that are revamping their programs, and now someone is eligible for an associate's, but under the 4-year college or with a community college?
So it would be under the 4-year college. So like if a student enrolled in the 4-year university right out of high school, and they might have a few community college hours, but they weren't enrolled as a full-time community college student or have less than 15 hours of community college credits. And then they get a couple of years into the program, and for whatever reason, they might need to stop out or drop out. The associate's degree would actually be awarded by the university. So by the 4-year university. Now, there are a lot of interesting partnerships across the 2-year and 4-year institutions. And I know that more in the pipeline. Cesar Maldonado from Houston Community College mentioned to me, he's reaching out to universities where they've got some of these short-term programs, and to talk to them about how they might be able to embed those community college programs within bachelor's degree programs. A&M is doing that with at least some of their engineering students with TSTC, where they're sending students down, I think to Harlingen, so that they learn welding as a supplement to what they're doing in their A&M engineering program. So we have some great examples of where, because you've got innovative leaders and partnerships where there's some great things happening. This is a direction we want to try to encourage in general, folks, to think about how you have multiple pathways for students to be able to be successful and earn credentials and innovate the design of these programs.
It's working great that the Texas State Technical College Chancellor invited me down there, and the students, Mr. Torrent from A&M, they come down there, they say, wow, what a world of difference. I'm actually seeing what the real world does. I'm getting a great education at Texas A&M in the engineering department academically. But then when I combine with this program at Texas State Technical Colleges, it really makes it a kind of real world situation. So the students are happy, the institutions are happy, and great job offers afterwards too.
Do we have an idea of how this will impact our matrix for credentials of value?
We have a general idea. So it's going to be, so this will be an interesting question about when we have a broader range. Essentially, what we're talking about is having a broader range of associate's degree programs over time. And so then we'll have to track, see what we see, what does that do to the market value? My guess, but it's just my hypothesis, is that I think it will increase the market value of associate's degrees to have it more folks holding associate's degrees. Because if you look at for example, how many folks have associate's degrees in Texas versus California. California has done a better job of having more people earn associate's degrees and have more intentional pathways and transfer pathways over a longer period of time than Texas has. So I think my hypothesis would be, as we see more folks who've got associate's degrees that could be from 2-year or 4-year institution, then you're going to see that more on the resumes of the students. And I think it will change what we see in the market value, but we're going to have to see what this does over time.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'm going to ask a question that I got asked by a chairman of a board of regents at a presentation I made recently. And I've shared it with the commissioner and maybe Dr. Outman or Ms. Meyer may know, but how do we stand nationally in terms of degrees granted in the higher education world, other states? I know over the years, we know there's certain states that do a little bit better as far as granting degrees, but it's not always about granting degrees.
Yeah.
It's the old US News and World Report. One of my alma maters from the Ivy League just pulled out. And then I don't know if you saw today, but Columbia, Stanford, Med, and also Penn have pulled out, as well as Harvard. But the question is, how do we rank in terms of that? And is that important? Obviously it is, but that was kind of a question that I had, and I was curious. I said that we're working very hard, and I know there was at least one state that was leading, but how I just want the board to be aware. So when we're all on the coordinating board, and people are going to ask you that, how do we measure up, right?
So it depends on what age of our population you're looking at. If you look at our older population, then we compare very well. We'd be in the second quintile or something. If you look at our younger population, we're at the bottom. We're at the top of the bottom quintile. So we haven't. So overall, that all rolls up to where you've seen our estimates on where we think educational attainment is right now in the kind of 48% range. That's of course one of the reasons that it was so important for the board, the foundation board, to come together and update the goals for Talent Strong Texas. Because to your point, Mr. Chairman, I mean so if we look at that kind of raw data on educational attainment across states, I'd encourage us also look at it across countries, because we're really, we're the 9th largest economy in the world. So, our economy is just slightly bigger than Canada's. Canada has educational attainment rates north of 60%. So we shouldn't just compare, ourselves with the other states, but a lot of that's just sort of counting credentials. And even what we're proposing here with with embedded associate's degrees, the idea isn't just to be able to count more things. So we've put an important marker down as a state that we've got a minimum value threshold, that we don't want to count anything below that minimum value threshold. And then our direction is over time to continue to make more transparent for institutions and for students. Here's what the demand looks like for these credentials. Here's what the wages look like over time. Here's what the break-even point for a typical student looks like who earns these different types of credentials. So that's in that, using the data and putting those markers down in policy, Texas is leading the way for the rest of the country. But you look at our educational attainment, to your point, especially for our younger population, and we've lost considerable ground compared to other states over the last decade.
Yeah, I want to make sure. Did you just say we're in the bottom 20% in the country of
the top of the bottom 20% of the country?
Yeah. We're in the bottom 20% of the country
for educational attainment.
I think I'll defer to
Well, Dr. Troutman, I
Dr.
guess-
Troutman, he's nodding, so yes.
The question is going back to Mr. Gordon, like percentages and quartiles are good, but are we number 25 or 24? Or does it really matter? I mean, it matters.
You know,
if we wanna be
offhand.
number one.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know, but those are kind of general questions that people ask, and I think it's important for the board to know, specifics in terms of where we stand, because, you talk to somebody, you're on the higher education boarding board, how are we doing, right? Those are.
Well, am I missing something? I mean, that's horrible.
Oh, no, absolutely. It's,
Well, that's why.
And
we
you,
look at it.
we are the ninth largest economy. So we got all these jobs and we're at the very bottom.
and I would say the thing is that if you look at the trajectory, we continue to add jobs and we're going to continue to add jobs, but are we going to be competitive for high quality jobs where you need high skilled labor? What we're hearing from employers all over the state. So like now Texas is breaking records for setting jobs. We had 1 million job openings in September. The best estimate I've gotten from the Workforce Commission is we might have 500,000 jobs that we can't fill because we don't have the graduates with the skills they need to be able to fill those jobs. So after inflation, that's the main drag on our Texas economy is we don't have enough people with the kind of credentials that they need to take these jobs.
Stay competitive. That's right.
Are we filling low-level jobs? Like, is the labor market fine there? It's
So
just the
we're
higher.
doing, we're doing a much better job at filling sort of the entry level jobs. It tends to be what folks sometimes call middle skill jobs. So where you need a certificate or an associate's degree or something like that. We're actually pretty good at filling the bachelor's degree jobs, except in certain areas. So we have acute shortages for nursing, for engineering, that kind of thing, teachers. But overall for bachelor's degrees, we're doing pretty well. We've got a serious shortage for the 2-year degrees and for those workforce certificates beyond high school diplomas.
Do we know about the higher level jobs as we're trying to attract more research and technology companies?
Yeah, this is a serious issue. Mr. Clemmer brought this up when we were talking about the forward loans that, Texas, for example, we want to be competitive for these new opportunities for funding, federal funding under the CHIPS Act. There's a major workforce component of that. So even if we could attract investments and build up our research capacity, are we going to have the skilled workforce that we need who can work in the fab, who can work in the advanced manufacturing? That's where some of these things that we're working on trying to innovate the pathways, streamline pathways, advocate for resources to expand our capacity in these programs. The really are on the front lines of these issues that we need to confront, and I would say that we're nowhere near where we need to be.
Yeah, and so that's the point. I think the point was because the fact is, Commissioner is exactly right. We're a large state. We have a big population. We have to kind of make sure we have the right entities in place to meet the needs for the workforce. And we have more challenges, quite frankly. But that's where these policy decisions come into play, is how do we improve that? And that's why I brought up the U.S. News and World Report, because it's not the people that really study it, and then the people in the schools and the institutions that look at that, is you've got to look at the playing level in terms of what the needs are. And that's why we need to know where we're at and what we can improve and what do we need to do to improve that, right? So you're going to, like anything else, you got to think, if you have a concern or problem, you've got to set a goal and you've got to move forward, right? And so we have a lot of challenges in our state in higher education because of these factors. We've got a lot more to consider.
We also got to make sure you're comparing apples to apples.
That's exactly right.
We may have more jobs available in this state that don't require educational credentials that some of these people are able to take advantage of, that, the end goal is getting met.
Yeah,
That's right.
that's right. But that also cuts both ways, because
does.
like those projections that we got from Georgetown's Center for Education and the Workforce. So we have So we project 62% of all jobs in Texas by 2030 to need some kind of post-secondary credential. So that's actually quite a bit lower than what their projections are for most of other states. So there's a whole lot of states that they're projecting that the types of jobs that they have are going to require more education, where Texas, the projections for Texas are that we would have more jobs that you don't need post-secondary credential for. But that's, that's sort of, there's good news and bad news there, right? And kind of where we're going to be able to be competitive for high quality jobs that require these folks to have the credentials.
And we need that in our state. We have energy state. We have, we've got so many different entities to fill and the needs that are necessary for our state compared to other smaller states. And so these rankings are not necessarily people. Sam, you know that about college football rankings. So people don't pay attention to those. Yeah, that's true.
Just a
Like,
quick-
that was a good explanation that you gave, because those are the kind of things that we need to look at to see what our needs are and ideas on how to improve.
Georgia has a question.
Sorry, I have a quick comment. I don't get to vote, but I think I think it's important for all of you to remember when accepting these rules, the positive impact you can have on the culture and the attitudes towards higher education. Because if somebody works for 90 credit hours or 2 years and at the end of the day gets nothing, they may have a negative attitude, and that can get passed down to their children or their children's children, future generations that may view higher education negatively, that my hard work means nothing because I got nothing at the end of the day. So when looking at these rules, remember, it's not just the learners of today, it's the learners of tomorrow and forward. So remember that.
Good point.
For me to.
Yeah.
Okay. So, based upon the comments that we received, we did make some adjustments to the proposed rules. And one of those adjustments was moving from a notification to Assistant Commissioner expedited review. So this will actually allow for a thorough evaluation of requests and ensure that the embedded associate's degrees are wholly embedded in those bachelor's degrees, and we're not doing terminal associate's degrees. So we're going to get those in through our new form. So we will be ensuring that. So you'll just see on that slide, I just showed on the two specific places in the rules that were modified to reflect that revision. Next slide. This revision is based upon a comment that we received stating that universities often have the core curriculum, those 42 semester credit hours of general courses distributed throughout their 4 years instead of primarily in the first 2 years. So given this circumstance, we propose an exception to that core completion requirement for an embedded associate's degree. However, institutions must follow their accreditation requirements for required core curriculum and an associate's degree. This exception does not include an embedded associates for multi-interdisciplinary studies, since those degrees and statute require to include that full core curriculum. So I also just wanted to mention to you all, so this idea of whether the entire core curriculum of the 40 semester credit hours needs to be completed for an associate's degree. And this is something that was actually talked about a little bit during the most recent Texas Transfer Advisory Committee meeting, and was also a key consideration for this revision as well. So this topic in general is something that we're starting to talk a little bit more about with different groups. So I just wanted to make you all aware of that. Next slide. So effective dates. So the new rule regarding preliminary planning takes effect January 1st, 2023. And for those proposed programs not requiring preliminary planning, the rules will begin September 1st. And then the academic associate's degrees takes effect immediately and is exempt from the preliminary planning. Given the embedded associates rule implementation date, we are currently working very hard to get that proposed form finalized. And in addition, the agency will work with the institutions, but the institutions will also likely need to work with their accreditor for their any necessary approvals. So that concludes my overview of the rules. and I'm happy to answer any other questions you all might have. And we recommend adoption.
He said the preliminary planning takes effect January 2023.
Oh, I'm so
June.
sorry. June.
June.
Excuse me.
June.
So sorry.
Okay. So, there. Members, any additional questions for Ms. Mayor? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the proposed amendment for Chapter 2, Subchapter D, Sections 2.50 through 2.58 and 2.57 through 2.70 through 2.74 of Board Rules concerning approval process for the new associate degrees?
So moved.
I have a motion made by Emma Swartz and a second by Mr. Torn. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item 5G2 is consideration and possible action to adopt proposed rule amendments to Board Rules 4.10A2, C1 through 2, and G of Board Rules concerning common admissions application forms. Ms. Molly Gully, Senior Director of Advising Strategy, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Good morning.
Good morning. It's good to see everyone again. The Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board staff recommends the proposed amendments to Chapter 5, Subchapter A Board Rules concerning the Common Admission Application Form. The proposed amendments make clear the elements necessary for determining admission to a general academic teaching institution, public community college, public state college, and public technical institute. The amendments also allow the coordinating board to enter into a contract with a public institution of higher education or another vendor in order to maintain the electronic application system. This will increase vendor options to provide a high-quality, secure, and user-friendly admissions portal. The amendments align with the agency's authority under Texas Education Code Section 51.762, which provides the coordinating board with the authority to adopt a common printed or electronic admissions application form, and requires each institution to collect information as part of the application process. Additionally, the statute provides the coordinating board with the authority to contract with an institution of higher education or other provider to make the common admission application available electronically. The coordinating board convened a negotiating rulemaking committee composed of higher education representatives on August 5th of 2022 to develop these proposed rules, and no comments were received during the comment period. This concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to take any questions.
One question, is common the same as standard?
When we refer to the common admission application form, we're referring to Apply Texas.
Okay. Members, any questions for Ms. Gully? All right, hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt proposed amendments to Board Rules 4.10A2, C1 through 2, and G concerning commons admission application forms? May I have a motion? A motion made by Mr. Wong. May I have a second? Second by Mr. Torn. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Agenda item 5G3 is consideration and possible action to adopt proposed amendments Board Rule 4.32 concerning fields of study curriculum. Elizabeth Mayer will present this item and be available to answer questions. Ms. Mayer.
So right now, the proposed rules support the implementation of the Texas Transfer Frameworks Field of Study curriculum work by allowing a total of 20 semester credit hours for discipline foundation courses and directed electives combined. So based upon the existing rules, we have a total of 18 semester credit hours. So some disciplines have chosen 9 semester credit hours for discipline foundation courses and then 9 for those directed electives. But as we worked with the subcommittees for some of the disciplines, this can potentially cause a hardship because there are a lot of STEM programs that actually have 4 semester credit hour courses. So if you have the lecture and the lab, it's 4 hours. So this is just basically providing the flexibility for the disciplines that will need that so that they can have those 4 semester credit hours opposed to the 3. So this is just something that we're making an adjustment to based upon the experiences that we've had with subcommittees that we've gone through so far. And there were no comments for this revisions to the rules.
Okay. Mhm. Okay. Any questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt proposed amendment board rule 4.32 concerning fields of study curriculum? Have a motion by Mr. Clemmer. May I have a second? Have a second by Mr. Frias. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes to the full board. Agenda item 5G4 is consideration and possible action to adopt proposed amendments to Board Rule 4.54A1A concerning Texas Success Initiative exemptions, exceptions, and waivers. Jarrell Booker, Assistant Deputy Commissioner for Academic Affairs, will present this item and be available to answer questions.
Good
Hi, Mr.
morning.
Booker. How are
Thank you,
you?
Madam Chair, members.
Yeah.
I'm standing before lunch, so I will make this brief. Often, the Texas Success Initiative is what we use to determine college readiness here in the state. We have a number of different ways of determining college readiness because we want to make sure we're equitable in how we give students opportunities from high school or returning back to college. So you can take the SAT, score a certain score, ACT, dual credit. There's a statutory college prep program. We also have our own exam called TSIA, which you've heard before, that also allows students to show college readiness. Periodically, we have to update the scores and rules to make sure all the community colleges and high schools, everyone knows what those scores are. So previously, we've come back and updated the SAT scores. SAT says, hey, this is our new college benchmark. We go back and update our rules to match that because it's kind of an exemption for you if you hit that target. So I'm here before you to update the ACT scores. And just so you all know, for the ACT, as any of those national exams, I guess we also do GRE has a national exam, there's HiSET, there's other exams. We ask the test companies to send us their college benchmark scores. Hey, what do you consider your benchmark based off of this criteria? And we really ask for 70 to 75% likelihood of scoring an A, B, or C in a credit-bearing college level course. That's industry standard. That's what we ask for. So they send us their scores. In this case, ACT sent us their scores and they posted on their website. So we're now here before you to include these into our rules so we can update the ACT scores for college readiness for TSIA.
So can I ask a question, Mr. Booker? Can
Sure.
you, since there's comments on this and we'll hear testimony, I believe tomorrow. So can you go over for the board, the SAT and the ACT and make sure so, that everybody understands the current mechanisms, how it works, right? Because it changes over time. So we got the SAT students can take either the SAT or the ACT or both, but they have different recommendations, correct?
That's correct.
That's what you're saying. So can you, a summary for the board, give us the SAT and the ACT and the proposed change for the ACT and how that compares with the SAT and why somebody would want one over the other or question one over the other.
So what we'll have possibly tomorrow if they show up is with the SAT, we ask for their college readiness scores. And let me just go back. The tests are different. They're different tests. The SAT is basically English and math, and the ACT adds English, reading, math, and a science component. So to try to mirror the two, there's a reason some people like to take the ACT versus the SAT and vice versa. So what we try to do is we ask them, what is your college rating? How did you do your validity study to determine that? So they have thousands and thousands of kids who take these courses. They go back, this is their grades, this is what they got, A, B, or C, and then they go back and give us that study. So the SAT has already done theirs. They sent their scores. The ACT is now doing theirs. This is our new benchmark score. This is what we think our scores are. So they are different scores because they are different tests, as are the GRE and so forth.
Right.
What we have, and thank you, Jennifer, is bringing up, is what we have is once we take those scores and put them into our rules, that's what's going to be based off the Texas students taking these exams. We have ACT going back and looking and saying, our scores might be harder than SAT scores or may be different. And for us, we don't use concordant schedules. That's what they call a concordant schedule. We don't look at whether your tests are similar or what may have you. We don't do that. We ask you to show us what your college readiness benchmark is. How many students have that sort of likelihood to get an A, B, or C? And that's what they sent us, and that's what we've used. Now, here's what's interesting and for what's going to come tomorrow if they come.
Can I ask you real quick
Sure.
again? Give us an example like the SAT algebra, a college algebra 1, let's say.
I don't see if I have it.
So
Five.
well, yeah, I'm just an example. So real world example, because I mean, this is important in terms of figuring out, you know, I won't give my personal comments about SAT or ACT, but some schools prefer one over the other.
That's right.
And, you know, and so we won't get into that, but my question, I think, is, you know, it's a predictive as far as somebody's going to make a B or a C or an A is what we're looking at, and percentage wise. But a lot of it has to do, I think, when you went to high school and your preparation, obviously. But my point being is that we're now just getting the ACT information, right? And so the question becomes: are we putting it in a position that they like, or how are we? What's the whole question? I think.
Yeah, well, I think
In a roundabout way, Mr. Torn, yes.
I think you're asking the right question, and just and Jarrell will correct me on this, but we do ask the testing companies, so what kind of correlations do you see for scores? And if we want to say there's at least 75% likelihood that students will get an A, B, or C in a college course, what do you see for your assessment? Then there's a separate question about, well, if you look across the tests, how are the tests like and unlike each other, and would one be perceived as being harder than another? Periodically, there have been some analyses there. There was in 2018, their College Board and ACT did work on some concordance tables. That's a little while ago, but they do more regularly for their assessment, try to define, okay, here's where we think the college readiness benchmark should be. So if you go to ACT's website, what should college readiness look like? Then that's aligned with the data they sent us and is in our recommendation. So we're not trying to read it anymore into, well, let's tweak that based on how that might relate to SAT. We're just asking the narrow question about where's the correlation between students getting A, B's, or C's. Right. So with 70-75% likelihood, they send us that score, and that's what we end up adopting as our benchmark.
Right. So I have a question on that. Do they have access to student scores?
Yes.
So in the future, the ACT company can look at a student's performance in college.
So they can, so they're constantly reviewing and updating that, because that's how they're scoring the test overall, and then what also they recommend for college readiness.
So I've heard different people claim that these tests are not good predictors of college performance.
Yep.
So how do we reconcile that they're doing this analysis? People are saying it's not. And have we looked at the COVID period of students who were, you know, when those tests were waived, whether that impacted admissions success, like how college feels they were able to bring students in?
So it's still early, and so what we saw is a lot of institutions went test optional, and a lot of institutions have stayed test optional.
Yes.
So in general, these tests are more predictive of freshman grades than they are of completions. The best predictor of whether students are going to complete is actually their high school grades.
Correct.
Right. So the high school grade. So this is it's an indicator. It is a pretty good predictor, especially of those freshman grades. So if an institution is trying to figure out which students we might want to focus some student success efforts on, it is pretty useful for that. but if you're trying to predict who's going to be more likely to graduate or graduate in 4 years, it's the high school grades. It's not the,
And-
it's
and
not the test scores.
Isn't there a correlation between socioeconomic status and that performance because of the amount of prep?
Yes.
So if we're
absolutely.
trying to get, this equitable, this whole situation more equitable, having an additional burden of that test that I think to many minorities is very intimidating. Why do we continue to require it in Texas institutions if there are better ways of predicting outcomes?
So we don't require it. We don't, it's one, so this is one of the ways students can demonstrate college readiness. There's a dozen ways that students can, literally a dozen ways students can demonstrate college readiness. So what happens if you're not college ready? So what used to happen is, well, then you could get tracked into remedial courses where you're paying tuition, you're taking out debt, you're having to take courses that you don't actually get credit for. So what Texas, as a matter of state policy and in statute, Texas said, well, we're going to move away from that because we can see that when students get tracked into those remedial courses, they rarely go on to complete, especially if they have sort of 2 levels of remedial courses that they're tracked into. So as a matter of state policy, we actually, we do co-requisite remediation. So what we do is we say, okay, well, if a student isn't college ready, the default should be go ahead and put them in the credit bearing course, but provide them with targeted support in the areas where they need support. And we encourage the institutions to do non-course based co-requisite remediation. So what that means is just if I need to be brushed up on a few concepts, then give me resources to brush me up on those concepts where I'm weak. And already in our rules, like how that works, me being able to get the college credit and pass the course isn't going to be contingent on me successfully completing all those extra modules or whatever that. So it's just we're using this in a way that's actually more diagnostic than folks might realize, because they're still used to sort of the old policy that this was a more of a barrier to students being able to enroll in college or not. So even if students don't hit that college readiness benchmark, that might mean that they get targeted remediation, but that doesn't mean that they can't enroll in college or they can't enroll in credit bearing courses.
And those are,
Different by different institutions.
It can be different. Well, it's an interesting question. So we have sort of our benchmarks. What I've seen that will be different by different institutions is more by the pathways that, like, with their placing students into particular courses. So especially for like students in STEM courses, they might, it's often not a matter of whether they met a minimum threshold. So there's going to be, when I was at, so my former institution, when I was at UT Austin, we had fewer than 150 students a year out of more than 8,000 incoming freshmen that didn't meet the state standard for college, kind of generally college ready. But that didn't mean that every student was ready for their degree pathway. So especially in the STEM colleges where you might have higher benchmark that you'd be looking for, and like if you're going to be able to place students into calculus in particular, or do they need to be brushed up on certain concepts?
So also, it's not only getting into these state institutions, but then getting into the business school and the College of Communication is #1 in the country. And it's not just getting into these schools. Now it's very competitive to get into the business school, into the College of Communication and, the natural sciences. And so it's not just, it's a stepping stone to get in. So it's interesting, right?
It is, but also one of the important points is, is it required? Like, do students have to take SAT, ACT? Do the colleges have to use SAT, ACT? In Texas, the answer is no, they do not have. So they can be test optional, and it does not have to be a barrier to students being able to enroll in these programs. But to your point, Mr. Chairman, it is an important input that's considered. when they're trying to figure out what kind of student support students might need, as I was discussing, but also it is considered at the front end when they're especially for very competitive colleges, for very competitive admissions.
And I think we shouldn't lose sight of what the commission said about diagnostic. A lot of students don't know what they don't know. And the beauty is, even if you pass the test, let's say our TSIA, you pass it by 1 point, are you any more prepared than a person who missed it by 1 point? But that person now gets support and understands what they need to actually work on, and the institutions can actually provide those supports. And we're finding with our co-rec work, particularly around equity, our co-rec work has definitely made it one of the biggest differences in education here in higher education in years, because it's not stopping you from moving forward. And we know, hey, you just missed fractions. When's the last time you did fractions? And they provide that for them, and they just keep moving along. So, also the other point Commissioner made is they're not required, meaning you can take a K-12 end of course exam and show college readiness, dual credit and show college readiness. You don't have to deal with the ACT or SAT. We're just giving as many options as we possibly can for students to be able to demonstrate that and be able to keep moving forward. Even in the instance of this ACT exam, previously with ACT, because they have science mixed in with the English and reading, right, which we don't require science in our TSI, you'd have to get a 19 score and a 19 score, but one of those would have to be 23. Right. So if you got 19 on one, the other one better be 23. But what happens if you're 19 and 20? Now, all of a sudden, you're not college ready. So we, even in this newest one that you have before you, I think the new score was 18 and 22, but we've said 40. We just made a composite because some kids can do better. Some students can do better on one and not the other. So we've even made it more helpful and actually supportive of students of all races, colors, regions, or wherever, income, and so forth. So we've really been very thoughtful on that. And that's a new thing for this one moving forward.
So in a practical standpoint, what is the term college ready? What's the threshold get you? Anybody, from anywhere in the state, if you meet some threshold, you're now college ready. What difference does that make?
A little thoughtful question. So y'all want lunch? All right. So let's put it this way, at least for this national exams, we're looking for, you have a 70 to 75% likelihood. So you're going to get an A, B, or C in one of those first classes. That's what we're hoping for. That's those national exams. For dual credit and other exams, we're looking at, you've already proven that you can do college work. So we're not actually going back and looking at an exam score at that particular time. The biggest difference we found through the years is students were showing up to college not ready. They didn't have the skills to actually write well or do math, and we're actually finding out in advance before they get there.
My question is more simple than that.
Yeah.
If I take this test, and let's say I come from a school where I don't have all the resources that other people do, I didn't get to take the prep test, the practice test, the prep course, none of that stuff.
Mhm.
So I don't make the same score as someone else. So I'm not college ready. Does that mean I can't go to college?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. So let me also just insert, like, you right now, what happens next would so in general, you could go to college, right? But what happens next is going to depend a lot on where you go. And and just in interactions with different presidents. So for example, I talked about some of the work at Houston Community College. And so they've been leaders in implementing co-requisite remediation, in getting go ahead and have the students enroll, get them into the credit bearing courses and provide them the support they need to be able to be successful in those courses. And what they told me is that in they've seen increases in the student persistent success rates of like 15%. So when you try to figure out, here's what kind of support we need, and we target that support. So what their chancellor said to me is, he said, I'm not looking for ways to be able to call students college ready if they need this additional support. But we do have some other colleges that are going to say, we don't have the resources to support any more than the number of students that are identified as not being college ready. And so if a student is just below that threshold or they're substantially below that threshold, they may not get as much in student support. So this is going to be one of the important issues that's going to come up when we're talking about community college finance, because the state's never provided additional resources to the colleges when they enroll students who are not college ready that they need to provide these supports to. So that's an important part of the recommendations, right?
Yep.
That would be administered through the coordinating board and with to actually providing resources. So not just saying, here's the threshold and students are college ready or not, and where you need to provide additional support, but for the first time, we actually have resources that could go to providing those supports to students so that students across Texas could have there would be a better chance that they're going to have that consistent experience if they go to a less well-resourced college versus now if they go to a better resourced college.
So that's a good example, Mr. Torn, the commissioner just cited about going to the legislature and having the data that says these people are college ready, but what about those that aren't? We need to support them. So they want data to look at that. And so but I understand your point because I totally agree with you on that part about how you use that as a necessity, but you've got to provide that in order to get the help for those that provide opportunity. So since you're a JD, Mr. Booker, why do we have exemptions and we have exceptions and waivers? What's the difference? It's all the same thing, isn't it?
They're on the same section for a reason, but yeah,
Okay.
it just allows, I mean, I don't want to get involved, right? Legal counsel, like you got it. So I just think starting off, some people aren't even you have an exemption for certain exams,
Okay.
right? You're waived from taking certain exams if you've actually done it. And what was the last one? Exemption waivers and exceptions. And for example, if you pass certain things in advance, then you have those sort of exceptions for it. And I think we have exceptions also for military too, in some instances that are also in our part of that section.
Okay.
Just for the record, I don't like the term college ready. I think it's got a stigma with it. I don't like it.
Yeah.
That's coming.
I agree with Sam.
I know.
Well, it's interesting, and it used to be developmental ed was also a big term that has changed for as terms are concerned. And in your example, Mr. Torn, if you hadn't done well in the SAT and you also took the ACT, we'd also look at how you did on your high school exams for your end of a course exams. We would also look at if you took dual credit, and then we would also consider we maybe need to put you in the college prep course, which you can actually pass and still be the term you don't like. Be prepared for college.
Yeah, I think what Ms. Schwartz brought up at the beginning is very important because as Commissioner knows, I look at we both look at national admissions and things as well as Texas. And with the pandemic and with test optional, it'll be interesting to see a lot of schools, universities around the country have had higher people enroll because of that, right? So maybe give people an opportunity to look at the data and moving forward a couple of years from now to see how those people perform at the university and to answer the question like Sam brought up earlier, Mr. Torn, about, what is the significance of it? But, that's not our role right now. But the fact it'll be interesting to see that data, I think.
And part of it, and I'll just, for my own sake, my daughter is a senior, and to decide whether you submit your SAT or not.
Yeah.
Or your ACT, like, is this school going to take this one or should I just hold it back? And those sort of things also were interesting in knowing how to deal with that also. So
Yeah.
Any other questions? Because I love this discussion.
Would it be appropriate to ask about if we have any discuss comments?
We had to open, our regular rules process. We did not receive any comments during our process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, well, I respectfully request adoption of this to move forward to the full board.
All right, any additional questions for Mr. Booker? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt proposed amendments to Board Rule 4.54A1A concerning Texas Success Initiative exemptions, exceptions, and waivers? May I have a motion?
I'll move.
I have a motion by Emma Schwartz, second by Daniel Wong. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes.
Thank you.
Agenda item 6 is adjournment. If there's no further discussion, may I have a motion? Motion by Fred Frias. May I have a second? Second by Mr. Clemmer. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Motion passes. We'll now take a short break to allow staff to set up for the Agency Operations Committee meeting. The next meeting will begin shortly.